It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
Welcome to this week's version of Fill Your Plate Now, where we look at the science behind what it takes to go from farm to table with your food, as well as look at all of the individuals that help make that happen and look at our health and how we can eat healthier with that farm to table version of filling your plate in mind. Today, we're really excited to have a special guest.
Yes, I'm excited to learn about this individual.
This Abigail Copenhaver is joining us today, and she is a very special guest in that she is a dairy farmer, and she grew up on a dairy farm, but she also is a registered dietitian. So she truly takes that whole farm to plate scenario to heart.
She's a composite of the two of us. Since you're the nutritionist and I'm the farm girl, here we have someone that can speak to both of those. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and she is joining us today from Stanley, New York. She's a registered dietitian, dairy farmer, educator, owner of Farmstead Nutrition and Consulting. She has a background rooted in a large dairy farming family, and now she's raising her own kids on the farm in the Finger Lakes region. She's going to bring us a unique blend of hands-on farming experience and scientific nutritional expertise in what she's saying today, and whether she's developing dairy-inspired recipes, speaking on the impact of nutrition for all life stages, or educating future professionals at Finger Lakes Community College. She's very passionate, it's clear. She's been affectionately known as the Dairy Farmer RD, and today we're going to talk with her about the vital role dairy plays in family health and how she balances her farm life and professional life and what it means to be a voice for agriculture.
That's
Abby,
awesome.
yeah. Abby, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. You know, like you said in my intro, just balancing a bunch of things today.
Isn't that life? You know, it's all peaks and valleys. Sometimes everything has to be balanced and sometimes it's calm, but it's never even keel across the board, I think. So, but we wanted to dive right in today, first of all, and just have you talk to us a little bit about what it was like to be raised on a dairy farm.
Yeah, so I'm one of 8 kids, and my parents still operate the dairy farm. It's about 20 minutes north of here. And it's funny because so many people nowadays are removed from agriculture and their food production story. But, you know, for me, growing up on a farm, I didn't realize that I was the minority when it came to that, you know, the journey. So when I got into, you know, 4-H and other agricultural organizations as a youth, my parents were very active in the community. I fell in love with telling the story of, you know, how your food's produced, how it gets to you. And when I realized that you could do it, you know, as a job via a dietitian, I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to do. Because as you might have found out, farmers aren't keen on being in the spotlight. That's why usually they're all in agriculture, because they love just being out of the spotlight, being with animals or with their land. And they're not very social when it comes to, you know, going to community events or whatever and being in front of large groups of people. So I was like, I can do that. So, but I still love being on the farm as well. So being married to a farmer is nice because I get a little bit of both worlds. So
That's awesome.
I really enjoy it.
And Abby, I identify with that background, and certainly one of 8 kids, you had to find your voice. So I think you've merged that and put that together. But I grew up on a cotton, wheat, and alfalfa farm here in Arizona. So, and it was funny because when you're little and you're not really as you get older and you're interacting more with the community, you discover, oh my gosh, I am kind of cool because I'm a farm kid. So I totally identify with what you speak of.
Yeah.
And in that environment with 7 other siblings and then growing up on a dairy farm, what inspired you to begin cooking? And I get a vibe from your background that you really got into that even when you were still young.
Yeah, so of course I was in 4-H. My mom actually was an extension agent before she married my dad. And so all that type of, I guess you'd call it home ec skills that they don't really teach in school anymore, was very introduced to me at a very young age. And I took to it and loved cooking. And then I realized my dad liked people that, like to negotiate. So what I would do is I would say, if you let me leave chores early, I will cook dinner. And that's kind of like the arrangement we had.
Really clever.
Whereas some of my sisters were more like, I'd rather work another hour and come home to dinner. So, and I love my Nana would send whatever cooking magazine subscriptions. And I would love to, pick out new recipes and tell my mom what ingredients to get. And there's even one time where I learned the concept of meal planning, and I was so excited. I came up with this calendar of what our meals were going to be. And then when my mom or my sister started deviating from the meal plan calendar, I just was like, oh my gosh, how could you not love this? Why are you deviating from the plan? So, I got some early introduction to trying to make sure that your nutrition and meal planning goals fits your family, not the other way around. Because...
And family can be brutal sometimes too, can't they?
Oh yeah. My dad was very honest with his critiquing of my recipes, and I was like, okay, like I'll take notes and all that. So.
Trial by fire. Well,
Yes.
that's a big undertaking, though. If there were 8 kids in your family and your parents, that had to be huge quantities you were putting together there.
Yeah, actually, when we got married, that was one of the toughest things to learn, is to not make so much food.
Well, plenty of leftovers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unlike you and Julie, I did not come from a farm background. I've worked with dairy for quite a while now, but I did come from the nutrition background. I also went to school to become a registered dietitian. Was there any single event or what prompted you to want to go into the nutrition field?
Yeah, so like most of the general population, I didn't even know. I mean, I knew dietitians existed because my aunt is one, but she's a food service. Well, she's retired now. She was a food service director. So I didn't realize the vast scope of options you had as a dietitian. I just knew that she worked in like catering, and then she, switched over to school lunch and stuff. And then when I was at Cornell and I was doing food science, because that was kind of my plan, I was like, well, maybe I could do like food science and like work in R&D and stuff like that. And I was one of the state dairy princesses, and we went to a hot chocolate event in New York City, and they had a dietitian come to do the segment with the princesses to talk about using milk in your hot chocolate, especially in the winter, as a vitamin D source. In the cold months and things like that. And I was like fascinated by this. And I, picked her brain and all this stuff. And one thing led to another. And I ended up graduating from Cornell and then transferring to another college to complete my dietetic requirements. And, from there, one thing led to another. And now I, dabble in my own business. I teach at a local 2-year nutrition program, and then I also help with the farm and all that. So
a great mix there. And, maybe you were inspired with that milk chocolate, or that when you were a dairy princess, and who knows, maybe it was some of the insights too when you were getting your degree. But what is your philosophy, your farm to table philosophy, if you could, put it together in a couple sentences?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like, because people are so removed from agriculture, I feel like for me, right, I don't know everything there is to know about farming, because I'm in the dairy farming space, and every commodity of agriculture is very different. So I feel like cultivating those relationships along the way from farm to table are very important. So whether
Mm.
that's, getting involved in your community and having sources to ask questions, or, in the nutrition space, making sure one of the large things I do is educating dietitians on agriculture, because that's something that is heavily missing from, our curriculum when we go through our requirements. And I feel like that cultivating relationships with people in your community, on the local level, national level, being involved so that you stay, on top of those emerging technologies, those emerging resources. Because the farm to table, I feel like in a lot of people's minds, it looks like, having a picnic out in the field next to your local farm or something. And it's not necessarily that romanticized, because when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to farm to table, we're talking about a lot of different components, right? Some people live in the city. So local to them might be several hours away, whereas me, local is in my backyard. And, um, you know, because of the time of year here in the Northeast, we want to be able to have options. So being able to get, fruits and veggies from California or from wherever is really, really crucial to making sure that we have that variety in our
Right.
diet for those fruits and veggies. So that farm to table, philosophy and story is very expansive, and it's on a national level and a local level. So I feel like being able to cultivate, you know, resources and relationships so that when things come about and you have questions, you have somewhere to go. Or, if you are familiar with your local farms, being able to start, a connection and relationship with them so that you can either reach out to do field trips with your kids, or be able to ask questions when you hear something on the news, and so on and so forth. And there's actually a lot of really great farmers that do a lot of, social media or blogging to provide resources, or virtual farm tours for people that are in the, the true, what I call the true city, but, like New York City, where, getting out and getting on farms might not be realistic.
Right.
So a lot of stuff during COVID really helped be able to bring that farm to table story into people's homes, because it's not always realistic for people to, do it themselves or
Yeah.
go out.
And Abby,
So
I love that you use the word cultivating relationships for the non-farm public. Cultivating is a word that we use a lot in agriculture, so I love that you use that.
I know that's great, but I agree 100%. So many people are detached from agriculture right now. It's amazing what their preconceptions are, and with doing nutrition counseling and having the dairy side of things as well, what were some of the biggest misconceptions you've seen?
yeah, I feel like we live in a very interesting culture, because one, you have like this dichotomy of people being really removed from agriculture, but everyone eats. So in a weird way, they think they're closer to agriculture than they actually are, and they have a very strong opinion on it. And then there's also this kind of a homesteading movement
Oh yeah.
happening, where people are gardening, or they have chickens, or maybe they're starting a sourdough. So then they like feel like they kind of have skin in the agricultural food production game. So then again, they get very opinionated. And then there's also like the livestock part of it, right? People are very removed from having livestock farms. So their perception is through the lens of their dogs and cats that they have at home that are extremely domesticated. So um, a lot of this, misconception I have around agriculture is just helping people understand how much they don't know about food and how it's produced and everything that goes into it. There's, again, I feel like some aspects of sustainable farming is this romanticized picture of, green pastures and red barns and things like that. And being able to, feed the population that's growing, we're adding like whatever, over 2 billion people by 2050. We need like 70% more food and all that. It's not gonna look like that. That might be some farms, and learning about agriculture, and that not all one blueprint fits all businesses is important, but we need to be able to be open-minded in the sense that like what one way works for one farm might not work for the other, and there might be bits and pieces that everyone's using, and I always like to use the example because I'm from a big family. We had 8 kids. So the way we ran our house and were able to function is not the way, a family of 2 kids was going to do it. But it doesn't mean one way is better than the other. It's
Right.
just what works and made sense and kept people, fed, healthy, growing, succeeding, thriving, that type of thing.
Wow, I love that. Talk a little bit about your consulting business and staying on the misconceptions. Do you find that there's one misconception that is more commonly exists and that you have to dispel? And certainly tell us a little bit about your consulting business.
Yeah, so my consulting business kind of it's like you said, like I'm kind of a rare breed. Like not a lot of people are dietitians and farmers, and I do enjoy educating the public. So a lot of my work that I do is mostly just either doing social media segments, recipe development for different ag commodity groups, presentations, like speaking engagements, sitting on different boards, just to, again, bridge the gap, right? Because I have that unique background.
Right.
So in a lot of context where I'm applied, I can bridge a gap very nicely because I understand both sides. So that's kind of what I do. And then I also work with, the student population as well. So a lot of the misconceptions I find is revolved around the environment. And it is, again, it's very interesting because specifically my generation, where they question things more, they don't just take things as is. We're starting to have kids. So we're trying to figure out, like, okay, this generation that questions everything and wants to know all this and that, we need to reach them, because not only are we trying to correct the misconceptions for their current generation, but they're also going to be teaching those conceptions to their children that they're now having. So you're starting to see all this stuff kind of come up with the kids too. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. But it's because everybody's saying, like, hey, I grew gardens and now I have like all these questions about, or I go to the farmer's market and now I have all these questions, which isn't bad. It's just making sure that people realize that technology in agriculture helps us promote more food sustainably. And it's not something to be fearful of, but the nature of people not understanding something, they tend to just be fearful of it. So I do a lot of work just talking about sustainability, that, I always joke, I'm like, people think that farming is bad for the environment. It's ruining, our ozone layer, all this stuff, negative stuff.
Yeah.
And I always like to present it like, okay, we literally have data around agriculture and, sustainability metrics dating back into like the 40s. I'm like, whereas you and our individual households, or even other, corporations, how many of them have, greenhouse gas emission metrics that they can measure back that far? So really agriculture has been green before green was even cool.
Right.
We're kind of, everybody talks about like these weird, like cyclic things come back into trend. And I'm like saying that, I'm like, wow, now that sustainability is trendy, everybody is all into it. I'm like, well, farming, we were into it before it was trendy,
Right.
because we literally can't survive unless we are being very mindful and purposeful with our resources, and knowing how to allocate them and how much we have, in looking, 5 to 6 to 50 years down the road. So it's kind of a double fold benefit for us. It's more profitable. It ensures longevity and future planning to future generations that you would be passing the farm down to. And then it's also, the better we take care of our land and animals, the better the production,
Right.
thus more profitable we are. So just explaining that to people and just finding common ground to be able to connect and relay that story is really primarily what I do.
One of the misconceptions I deal with all the time in my current job, and then just when people discover that I'm a farmer, that I'm so surprised that they always assume farmers aren't, modern day farmers aren't good at taking care of the soil. Oh my gosh, we spend the entire year, the 365 days, making sure we're taking care of our soil. Otherwise, we could not be generational farmers.
Oh, yeah.
So I identify with Abby, what you deal with, probably dispelling some very common misconceptions on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I love the we were green before green was cool part of the agriculture. And although you probably don't have to deal with it as much there, people don't realize here in Arizona that dairy farmers recycle their water 4 to 6 times. I mean, how many actual consumers do that at home? So yes.
Right. Yeah, we do. So that is water. I should have elaborated a little bit more because under the, environment, and resources, water definitely falls in our wheelhouse in a different context because, right, depending on where you are producing food in the United States, your resources and allocation and where they come from are a little bit different. But even here, where we have what I would say is an excess of rainfall per year, we still have to be very conscious of our water, right? Because we have kind of the opposite problem. We don't make sure our fields are draining well. We get a lot of topsoil land erosion. And if, we got to make sure we're very careful about all the creeks and rivers that run between, all of our fields, making sure that we don't have runoff. And then we actually, a lot of people in our area, we have, we call it town water, but it's public water. So we have a water bill every month that we pay, and milk is 87% water. So just to keep our expenses in check, we're going to be super conscious about our water and using it responsibly and using it over as many times as possible. So yes, in our area, we usually say it's anywhere from 2 to 4 times that we use water. And you're correct. I point that out to people. I'm like, do you know how many times is your house even set up to use
to
water?
recycle water? Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I know before we went on the air, we were talking a little bit about families. So I'll switch gears here. And for our listeners, how do you apply what you know towards feeding your family?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't always divulge that I'm a dietitian because it makes people uncomfortable sometimes because they think you're the food police for some reason. And I am always like, no, like if you come to my house, I'm not going to just be feeding my kids, quinoa and, like exotic foods that, but I always try to tell people you have to make sure nutrition fits your lifestyle, not your lifestyle fits nutrition if you want it to work for you. So what I do, the problem that I have with a lot of these media diets that go out there is they literally blueprint something, stick it out there, and everybody's like, well, if I can't follow this, then I'm just discouraged and I can't be healthy. But healthy can look different for everybody, and healthy doesn't have to be fancy, right? So for my kids, I'm not over here spending an hour in the kitchen, 3 times a day to crank out these, elaborate meals. A lot of it is really simple because being able to show them how to make their own food and help them get excited about making food, whether that's helping me make a grocery list or going to the store and picking out food with me or putting groceries away, asking them, what do you think we should have for dinner tonight? These are our options. Just keeping it positive and making it so that it fits our schedule, is a big thing. And, you have a lot of people that are, maybe living the frozen pizza life and they're looking at these quote unquote healthy, spending all this time shopping and prepping is just not achievable for them. And there's definitely something for everybody, small changes, little steps that can work for everyone. It's just really working with someone or finding a way to do that on an individual basis because it's not one size fits all for sure.
It's good to hear you say that because I remember when my kids were little and, the blueprint I had for one that worked really well totally had to be thrown out for the second one because they were a pickier eater. So every person is different and every family is different and a lot of lifestyles are different. So I know it's fitting it to what your lifestyle is and what works for you, so you can do it on a
Yeah.
continual basis to keep a family healthy.
Yeah, and role modeling is also really important. I'll never forget there was this one time I was working with this one family, and they were talking about a certain cupboard at their home that was mommy's diet cupboard. And they didn't say it in a negative context. It was just a matter of fact. Like, mommy has different foods that nobody else can have, and it's because she's on a diet. And it really opened my eyes because there's so many things to role modeling, right? Positive body image, cooking skills, just a positive relationship with food. And so your kids are watching all that. So again, you can do all the right things, but if you're also not doing it with them, that's going to impact them as well. You can't just feed them the fruits and veggies and then not eat them yourself. So it's really something where you go together, right? Like, what's that old African proverb where they talk about, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So
Right.
if we want to go healthy, live long, stay connected as a family, you got to kind of move together.
Right.
I love that. I love that. You have to be real and you have to work together. That's great.
So, Abby, we know you're a triathlete too. Talk about how milk helped you with peak performance, so to speak, or dairy in general.
Yes. I laugh because I've had so many people ask me now they have kids, they're like, what's harder, a full distance Ironman or having children? And I just laugh because I'm like, definitely having children. Like, that's nice. It's not even no. But yeah, no, I mean, dairy, and again, talking about positive relationships with food, getting into the world of triathlon, I saw so much misconception around nutrition. And in the triathlon, us nutrition people joke it's the fourth discipline that people always miss, because people will spend all this money on equipment, they'll spend all this money on coaches and training plans, and then nutrition is kind of just like, oh yeah. And then they wonder why race day they didn't show up on race day, they didn't have the results that they wanted. And it can take people well into so many years before they figure out, oh, nutrition is a really big part of this. So for me, fortunately, coming into it, it wasn't as much of a learning curve. But I loved being able to bring dairy specifically to the world of triathlon, because again, it's another thing where triathlon tends to be a very affluent sport. So people love the replacement shakes and the extra supplements, and it's like silly because I'm like, you can just have whole foods. It's again,
Yeah.
it's an interesting place because you have people saying like, I want whole foods, just fruits and veggies and grains, but then they're also like spending a ton of money on all these extra supplements and shakes and all this stuff. So it's kind of interesting, but I always would go gung-ho on chocolate milk after a race. And if they weren't going to have it there, I would pack my own so that I made sure I have it. And when I have my kids, I had a doula with a birthing plan. And on my birthing plan, I have like postpartum that I want chocolate milk so that I can have it after birth. Because in my mind, I'm like, if this is harder than an Ironman, then obviously I'm going to want chocolate milk. And my doula is like, I have never had anybody put that on there before. So I went into labor in the middle of the night. So she actually stopped at the store and got chocolate milk and brought it to the hospital. She's like, wow, I was worried if the kitchen was closed. Like, oh my gosh, what if Abby doesn't get her chocolate milk?
I love that.
That's fantastic. That's great. Yeah, as a runner myself, I'm always interested in training diets, and it always made me crazy too with marathons. Everyone wanted to carb load the night before, but they hadn't been fueling their body leading up to it, and they really forget about how important it is to fuel your body afterwards. Talking about what you were eating when you were training, did you have a specific training diet that you followed, or just depending on the day, what you felt like you needed?
I mean, I was very conscious about it. I didn't have like it's definitely, I think you had Leslie on here. I think she kind of refers to it as eating lifestyle, not a diet, just because diets have like such a negative connotation. But so like at that phase of my life, my lifestyle was triathlon. So my eating definitely shifted. So I was more, versus watching portion sizes, going one direction, I was like, oh, I need to be more conscious to have larger portion sizes or packing extra snacks, which actually really helped me when I headed into my breastfeeding years, because I was like, oh, this is kind of like triathlon because I just have to eat and drink a lot more. And that was kind of another learning curve too. When in between my son and my daughter, I returned back to the 70.3 distance. And so I had to learn how to, in addition to consuming enough, hydration and nutrients for training, I also had to make sure I was staying on top of it, so my milk supply did not go down. So it was really making sure it just had to be very intentional and very conscious.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't go throughout the day being like, oh, like I'm leaving the house today and I don't have anything with me. It had to be very planned out, so that I made sure, like, at the end of the day, I knew that I consumed a certain amount, and I knew that I had, X amount of, so it literally meant, keeping gallon jugs of water in the car and having certain food stable snacks that I could have again in the car if I needed it, and just being very mindful of, I'm going to need X amount of extra groceries because I'm eating more, things like that. And I kind of enjoy that a little bit, but the only time when it comes to training where I would get very particular and, nitpicky with down to numbers and calories was the fuel I was actually taking in when I was training. So if I had a long run or a long ride, because the biggest thing is, you're training your muscles and, getting distance and all that, but you also need to train your gut to be able to take on those nutrients while you're exercising at that volume for that long. So a lot of times I would try to always push it to be like, can I get a little bit more water in? Can I get a little bit more electrolytes in? Can I get a little bit more food in? Because again, like you talked about carb loading the night before, you can't just all of a sudden the day of the race be like, oh, I'm going to like eat the whole time while I'm racing because I know I'm going to need it. You have to train for that, so you don't have like GI issues and things like that. So that was the only part of training where I was very, very conscious about, because also when you go out to race, you have to take like a certain amount of food and that's all you get. So I would make sure that I had that, down to a T. But outside of that, it was mostly just making sure I had enough of what I wanted in the house to make sure that I could make enough food and have enough food when I leave the house to take with me and that sort of thing. Because I didn't want to find myself eating out, or spending, because it's the most dangerous thing is to go into a store when you're hungry. So.
Yeah.
Did I catch that you were competing and having kids at the same time?
Yeah. So
awesome. Okay.
I'm not a professional athlete, but it's something that, it was a very big part of my healthy. I don't have any hand-eye coordination. People are always like, oh my gosh, you do triathlon, you're so cool. And I'm like, wow, the tricky part is the reason I do it is because you don't have to catch or throw anything. So
I love
that
it.
is why.
Yeah.
And I've always loved swimming, which a lot of people, that's like the reason they stay away from it. But I just enjoy it. So when I got back into it after I had kids, it wasn't because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get my old body back. It was something that I loved to do. And it was like the way I stayed active. And I love the natural diversity of triathlon. It's you have a great, between strength training, swimming, biking, and running, you have a really good diversity of exercise, which is great for the body. So it's something I just wanted to get back into. I'm not saying that somebody that just had a baby should be like, oh, healthy is getting into this. It's going to be different for everybody.
Sure.
But
that's interesting.
Yeah, so.
Well, and you are a foodie and you are a mom. So what are some of the favorite recipes that you like to cook for either just in general or the family overall, or maybe when you're having friends over?
Yeah, so with my kids, anytime you talk something up, like party this or charcuterie that, and it sounds super fancy, they get really into it. But really what it is you're just like putting together a plate of all the food groups.
Yeah.
But we're really big, they love to make their own pizzas. We have mac and cheese a lot. We love one dish meals. So like you put it all in a dish, you cook it, and it
Mm-mm-mm.
was funny because growing up, my mom
Those
did
are
a lot of
good.
casseroles. I never understood why. And now that I'm a mom, I'm like, this makes sense. I understand.
You can get it all in
Casserole.
one dish, and you don't have to have as many dishes to wash at the end. So,
I
Right.
love casseroles.
Casserole. Well, they call them, one pot meals or like crock pot. The casseroles doesn't sell anymore. It's not as like, it doesn't sound as cool, but
Yep.
that's essentially what it is people are just making a bunch of casseroles, whether it's a grain bowl or whatever.
Yeah.
you just give it a
So,
fancy name, and it's good.
That's
right,
good.
right. Yeah. So, a lot of times, the week we grocery shop, like I have in mind everything that we want to make. And I'll even ask the kids, I'll say, Mommy's putting together a grocery list. Like, is there any dinner that you want me to make coming up? And, my 5-year-old is usually pretty, he loves that type of stuff. And, he'll always come up with something. And, he likes, this time of year we're getting into grilling. So we're always, even making burgers and things like that. They really love finger food. So really it's just as simple as just having a lot of fruits and vegetables cut up and in the fridge that they can pull out. My son's really into independence. So like the fact that he can be like, Evelyn's my daughter's name. Evelyn, I'm gonna get us a snack, and he'll go and make them like peanut butter jelly sandwiches and get out carrots and hummus and
That's
or
so
get them
cute.
yogurt.
That's
And
cute.
so just having everything kind of like ready to go in there so that he can. And I maybe it's because of the way I grew up. I don't ever, say you can't go in the fridge and have stuff. It's always a conversation. Like, come to me, tell me you're hungry. We'll talk about your options. If you're, your brother, you can go and get it. If it's my younger kid, like I'll go help you. Because again, I don't want to create that, um, kind of you can't have this negative connotation around food. It needs to be kind of like, I understand that. Like me too, as a person, sometimes I'm not as hungry at this time of the day, but then an hour later I might be a little more hungry. So you kind of have to help them learn about their body and, when they're hungry, when they're not hungry. Some of the kids, my husband loves breakfast. So my kids have always been really good breakfast kids and I love breakfast, but some kids aren't crazy about breakfast. So trying to work with that kid to be like, okay, well, like, can we at least do a drinkable yogurt before you leave the house? So it's really just, again, it's not going to be people looking at what I do for my kids saying that is the picture of what you should be doing nutritionally for your kids, because it's going back to that, making sure nutrition fits your family, your lifestyle, not you cultivating your lifestyle around nutrition and what we think is, perfect nutrition.
I love that you're communicating with them at that level, especially about food. They will grow up very confident about what they're eating, especially because you're providing nutritious food for them too.
Yeah, and one of the common threads I'm hearing you talk about throughout our talk together here is planning. It sounds like you're a planner. You're planning a list to go to the grocery store. You're planning out meals. You're planning what you're taking when you're training for a triathlon so you have snacks with you. And I think that's a really important point, because if you take a few minutes to plan, then you can have all those things you need to fuel your body. But if you don't have the foods at hand, then sometimes that results in kind of going sideways on your diet. So I love that.
Yes.
And with your kids too, having snacks and things. What kind of snacks do you usually plan to have for them? Do you talk with them about what they like? And it sounds like they're accessible in the refrigerator for them. How do you keep them on track with healthy snacks?
Yeah, so the big thing I talk about with people, obviously for meals, you want, all the food groups present. But even for snacks, you kind of want to pair nutrient groups for more of a complete filling snack. So, having just carrots sounds super healthy, but it's not going to be very filling and you're not getting, fat or protein or things like that. So trying to have snacks and show them like things they can pair. So I usually have like drinkable yogurts in the fridge. I have hummus with carrots. They love applesauce pouches. I have there are some crackers that they can have, and I usually make sure I have other produce chopped up, whether it's peppers or apple slices or raspberries and even my son, he like loves blueberries. And I just try to make sure there's like a certain shelf that's at his level that they kind of know like that if we want snacks throughout the day and it's not, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, that, and we have a cheese drawer. So it's so funny because you can tell I'm a dairy farmer because it's not even like a cheese drawer. There's like one kind of cheese. Like there's like 3 or 4 different cheese options. So.
And I bet you already have it cut up for them so they have bite-sized pieces too.
Yeah, I mean, my husband loves string cheese, so we always have string cheese. But my daughter is more of cheese slices. She loves Colby Jack. My son, oh my gosh, he's become such a cheese snob. So around Christmas time, a lot of times because of just being a dairy farmer and involved in different things, people send us cheese as a Christmas gift. And so we've gotten some pretty bougie cheeses. And now his palate is like super advanced. And I'm like he's like, Mom, the one cheese we got that was really old and it was wrapped in cloth. I want more of that. And I'm like, yeah, that's really expensive.
I love it. It makes me want to come over to your house. Can I come over to your house? I love your refrigerator. Well, we should be asking the best tips that she can give us for, right?
Absolutely. I think to just kind of summarize
Yes.
all that you've said, do you have 3 takeaways that you would love for the listeners to remember?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, again, going back to the cultivating relationships in your community. And I feel like these tips are for wherever you fall. If you're a farmer listening to this, if you're a dietitian listening to this, if you're just a general consumer. So farmers need to cultivate relationships with their community so that they can be showing people what farming is, answering those questions. Dietitians need to learn, more about the farmers in their community and more about the consumers and what their needs are. And as a consumer, being able to learn about the nutrition education options in your community and the farms in your community, being able to cultivate those relationships so that everybody, knows what it takes to put food on the table and that our food supply is secure going into the future because everybody's moving forward together and we're not divided. And I feel like that's just a really big important factor no matter where you fall in that farm to table journey. And then of course, like you said, going back to planning, this one's kind of more focused on the eating side of things, but planning is important. You can want to do XYZ, but whether you're a farmer working on, the dairy farm all day and you're away from the house, you don't have a lot of time, or you're working 9 to 5 in the office, or you have kids and you're running to all these different things, being able to make sure you're super intentional with your food and making sure that it fits you. So again, that making sure nutrition fits into your lifestyle, not the other way around, would be probably my second one. And then third is just making sure you're educating people with hope and not fear. So it's so easy to villainize agriculture and the food sector. So if you're a dietitian educating people about food, making sure you're talking about the positive things, the things we should eat, not all the things we shouldn't eat. If you're a farmer, don't, put down other farmers or put down other sectors of agriculture or put down dietitians or consumers. Talk about what we can do to solve the problems, answer the questions. And then as a consumer, don't put down farmers, try to ask questions and learn about what you don't know. So really, I guess those 3 things would be cultivating the relationships, making nutrition fit your lifestyle goals, and then also just making sure you're educating with hope and not fear.
I love your third one. Educate with hope and not fear.
That was a great summary, too.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us today. It's great to see you again, and thank you so much. We look forward to having you on sometime again.
Okay.
And you're going to help me plan my meals better. I may be calling you. Remember your consulting business. So. All right. Thanks again, Abby.
Thanks so much, Abby.
Yes. All right. Yep. Take care.
You too.